All right, guys, welcome back to the Barbell Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brett Scott, and with me here today is an old high school friend, Lauren Dicredico. Lauren I've known Lauren for a long time, and then a few years ago, I noticed she's been putting up all this sports psychology stuff, and it was really good content. I really valued it and saw the good in what she's been trying to do with athletes of all ages and levels and abilities. And now she's doing some business stuff too. So we've got a lot to talk about after this. But Lauren, give us a little bit of your backstory and what brought you into the sports psych world.
Yeah. Hey, Brett. I'm excited to be here. So I have my master's in sport and performance psychology. I got that from the University of Denver. So I was a two-sport college athlete myself, Division III. I had some great opportunities in high school. We were softball team was pretty good back then, all the things, and had some life circumstances happen. My dad passed away at the end of high school, my senior week of high school. And so through all that, I ended up going D3 and playing the two sports and just was always fascinated by like why people do what they do, but then also just like my own mental health through that and how was I able to still be successful in some degree and not others. And so that was sort of the spark of like sports psychology and my interest in it. And so I went and did my graduate degree and then I worked for the military teaching performance psych with leaders. I did leadership development, all these things, and just always wanted to come back and start this sports psych business. That was always the dream. And so in 2019, I kind of started that mission and it's been evolving ever since.
Yeah, and you're a CrossFitter too, right?
Yeah, and I'm a CrossFitter, yes. So
Okay.
I did CrossFit for like 7 years, took a little hiatus and just went back into it. And that was a fun way to test sports psych on myself. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. And from the videos I've seen, it looks like you could be a pretty good weightlifter, which I'm still going to continue to try to convince you to make the jump to weightlifting.
Now is the time to convince me because back then people always said that because like conditioning is just it's not for me. I'm like the weightlifter all the way, but I was always like, man, the old like school girls and cardio bunnies and all that. Like I couldn't get past that. And now I'm like, man, I'm just naturally strong. Might be time. Might be
Yeah.
time.
And the way you were talking about your injuries earlier, it sounds like we have an issue with load management. So we could definitely help there. And that might be something we'll talk about this after,
We'll
but
exchange services.
yeah. The big thing is here that I want to get out of today as a coach, as a weightlifter myself, and between coaching weightlifting and powerlifting, there is a lot of mental aspect in this. So when I first started, and when you go to college to study exercise physiology, physical therapy, it's all about geez, here we go. Already starting. It's all about, what type of reps you should do, how you should do them, what exercises to prescribe someone. I've been coaching. The the less it's about that and the more it's about communication with your athlete, knowing where they're at in their life, like what stressors are on them, what are their thoughts on things, how do they perceive themselves, how does their mindset change in different environments, in different circumstances when you put different stressors on them or you expect different things on them, what things are they expecting of themselves. So there's so much more to the performance of an athlete and the success of an athlete, other than just what your program looks like and who you think your coach is and what they can do for you. So we've been competing nationally a lot now, and the higher and higher level we get, the less it becomes about the program and the more it becomes about the mindset of the athlete and getting them to this level of kind of self-realization about themselves, that they are capable of doing the things that they want to do. I've said this to some of my lifters before, and not everyone has heard this from me, and it's maybe a bit of a brash statement, but I think and you can disagree with me here, I want your thoughts on this, but in the world of powerlifting and weightlifting, I think every strength athlete has a little bit of narcissism to them. And what I mean by this, and everyone's like, whoa, Brett. And it's like, well, hang on. All of you come to me and you're stressed out about this meet coming up. And what you're worried about is embarrassing yourself. You're worried you're not going to do as well. You're going to let yourself down, or you're going to let your coach down. And all you're worried is you and your performance and how people are going to judge you. But what no one seems to take a step back and realize within that is all of you competing or doing the same exact thing. Not just on our team, on every team. Everyone's just worried about themselves, which is fine, and I think you should be. But it's for what reasons are we there? And it's like, we have to let that go.
Yeah, you are not wrong. So I am a firm believer, and even in the like, so I kind of go back and forth. Like I focus on performance psych, but that doesn't mean we don't pull from like general psychology and like clinical diagnoses and stuff. And while I'm not qualified to do that, I know a lot about it. And what we say about the DSM-5, which is the how you diagnose for psychology, is that almost everything is now on a spectrum, and actually everybody has little pieces of everything, right? These are just personality traits. And then to be diagnosed as it means it's affecting your day-to-day functioning in a way that's like unproductive, right? So you're going to have a little bit of narcissism. Even if you do the big 5 personality, neuroticism is one of the personality traits, and nobody has 0. So, you know, when you think about that, and even with depression, and this isn't to be taken like as a diss on anyone with it, myself included, but I always say it's a little bit selfish to be depressed, because you're really just thinking about yourself at the end of the day. And so you're not wrong. But on the other hand, any Olympic athlete, elite athlete, they have to have a level of like craziness to achieve what they're achieving, and obsession and self-obsession. So you're absolutely right. And so it's the people that really grow and develop and get that maturity and realize I can be both. I can have that drive, because they're afraid to lose that drive by losing that. And it's like, you can still have that drive while also not being a perfectionist and obsessed with what everyone thinks of you. You can have both.
Yeah. And I don't think it's even being obsessed with what people think of them. They're just worried that they're not going to portray themselves in this big way or something. And it's just like, you got to let go of that and move on.
Well, what's the difference?
Yeah, true. I guess that's a good question. That's a big debate I guess we could have. But there's I have here that I want to go over with you today. So,
all right.
You know, I think the biggest one, and something that came up recently with one of my athletes, and he's probably going to listen to this and he's going to know who he is. But, you know, we coach and there's so much that goes into coaching of, yes, we have to put their program together. We need to know what meets are coming up. We need to schedule that stuff. We need to be looking at their lifts, giving them feedback and everything else. And what we've recently done is we started giving more feedback to our remote athletes through an app we call Coach Now. So I can dial things in. I can, you know, slow the speed down and look at exactly where things are moving and stop it and tell you, hey, like, this is where you are. This is where I want you to move to instead. This is what I want you to think about. And the thing is, like, some people have done good with that and improved in certain aspects of their lifts that were true technical errors. And then other people started to go downhill. People wanted this. And I was like, hey, I don't think you need this. Like, you know how to hit the lift at 70%, 80%. Like, you know what it looks like. You know what's expected of you. You know what feels good, what feels bad. You can look at it yourself at this point in your training career and say, this is what I'm doing wrong and this is where I need to go. And so, but when we add more to that, right, and it's like, oh, X, Y, Z, this and that, I want this feedback, but I don't think it's what you need, right? You need to change your mindset about how you're approaching the lift. Like, why is it every time you walk up to the bar at 90% and all of a sudden you walk up to the bar at a different speed, your breathing changes, your facial expressions change, your body movements change? Like, why are those things happening? Those are the things I think we need to get to within the athlete, of changing, like, the stress, arousal, tension, everything they're holding within that can make more of the difference than just, I need more feedback. Because then we go into paralysis by analysis. And this one lifter came to me after and was like, you know, it was a few weeks, and he's like, yeah, I think I'm overthinking everything. I was like, yeah, no shit. Like, I told you this was probably going to happen with you. And some people are really good with feedback. Yeah. Others are very different. And every athlete kind of needs something different. But there was another piece here of, you know, someone had a bad training session and they texted me like, hey, can you just tell me that I'm good at this and that I belong in this sport? And I just stopped there for a minute. It was like, why do I need to be the one to tell you that you're good at this or that you're good enough for this? Like, you as the athlete need to believe that yourself. Like, me telling you this probably isn't going to make much of a difference. Like, I can tell you the progress you've made and this and that, and like where you were, what your goals were, and how far you've surpassed those by now. But like, if you don't truly believe those things, we have bigger issues to fix than just needing a hug and me, giving you pom-poms and telling you you're good at this and you should keep doing this. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things here. So I'll kind of, drop a couple nuggets and you can, feed where you want to go. But, with the first example about approaching the bar differently, at the heavier weight. And I imagine it's this way, but the other question is like, is it that they are approaching the heavyweight differently, or is it that they need to approach the lighter weights as if it's a heavyweight? Is it they need to start practicing that and maybe that is the right approach, the one that they're doing at that 90%, but they're not practicing that until they hit 90%. And so it's just, they need to start acting like each other weight before that and start doing that breathing that they end up naturally doing. And then, of course, it's combining in the sports psych skills and diaphragmatic breathing and all the things, and the confidence and how we can build that. And then even when you go on, like all of this is levels of confidence. And there's actually 4 sources of confidence. So while people do need to believe it from themselves, you can get it from other things. And so it's learning like love languages, but it's really, that turns into languages of appreciation or languages of motivation, however you want to use it. So this athlete sometimes needs to be told and reminded, and that's just words of affirmation. So sometimes they need that. And of course they also need themselves. So like a source of confidence is basically self-talk, but also motivation from others. So sometimes it's like, if you can't pull it out of yourself, where else can you pull it from in this moment? Okay, that's why coaching helps, and having a coach, put you on the lift, put you on the platform, put you on the ice. Back when I was a figure skater, like those things matter because they're there to support you, but then you have to do the work yourself too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other piece of that is just that at the end of the day, like anyone, like my thing is, and this has been something I've gone back and forth with as a lifter myself, is you can kind of have these mantras you tell yourself, and it's like, yeah, I'm strong enough, or I'm capable, and this and that. But and you can try to tell yourself that, but you can have like the little bird over here on the other side.
You have to believe it.
To truly believe it, and I think that's one of the.
So what I say about those mantras and quotes, things like that, it has to pass your gut check. Like that's why I don't like affirmations as just like people doing affirmations in the morning. I'm like, I can look when I'm brushing my teeth and be like, I'm beautiful. But like, I'm looking at myself like, no, I'm not right now. Like I'm disgusting. So that doesn't work. What you need to do is the things that do matter. Like, and there's usually 1 or 2 things that you do believe and truly hold, and you can use those ones. And then it's finding the other ones. And figuring out other ways. But you're right. Like, I don't believe in just throwing that, I'm strong, I can do this. If you don't believe that, it's not going to do anything.
How do we get someone to truly start to believe those things about themselves?
Well, they might not need to. So confidence is actually about knowing that so the root, I didn't take Latin, but I know this definition because it's helpful. The root word of confidence in Latin is trust in oneself. So it's not, I trust that I can do X outcome. Confidence isn't about the outcome. Confidence is, I believe that I have the capabilities to do what I need to do that may or may not result in this outcome. Right? Like anything can happen in that lift that could go wrong. But I believe I've done the work. I believe that I have the capabilities. And if I miss, I'm still confident. That is confidence. Confidence isn't, oh, they nailed it. Like you can nail a lift without being confident. So it's really figuring out, is confidence the issue? Is it about that they're not confident they can lift that weight, or are they not confident that they're even a weightlifter? Like you have to figure out where you're starting, and then you have to coach them from there. So getting someone to believe that they can lift a weight might not be necessary. They might go up to the bar and go, 9 times out of 10, I won't hit this weight, but I believe I've trained for this moment and that I have the capabilities to do it.
Yeah,
it's not the answer you're looking for, probably, but it's...
Yeah, and it's true. Like there's
about.
some people that I myself, like leading up to a meet, and I just started training for another one now too, but leading up to any meet, the week or 2 leading up to that, I have the worst training sessions of my life. Like the day before the meet, my coach would have me hit 70% for a single, and I would miss. And I'm just like, you go to bed at night thinking, I don't know if I remember how to snatch. I don't know if I'm going to remember how to clean and jerk. Can I do this? But then whatever happens, for me at least, is I go out there and it's just there. Like I always have been a very good competitor, and I find that with a lot of people is on meet day, people show up and they're either 5% better than they have ever you've ever seen them in training, and it's just like, where has this been this whole time in training? And then you have people that are 5% worse, where it's like, okay, we need to downplay this a little bit, and like we know, this is your top in training, but you have historically not done as well in competition. So we're just gonna, drop a few kilos off of your max and go to there. And over time, like we're still gonna make the same progress. It just is a little bit of a different course.
Or even you strategize an opening
Yeah.
weight based on the person, right? So like there's strategy and like this person would rather hit a lighter weight opener and feel good than go in. And some people are like, put me pretty close to my max for that first one. I want to see how far I can go, right? And it's there's personality to some degree, and then there's comfortability and in that environment. And like one of the things that I say all the time is, especially with weightlifting meets are so
Ugh.
quiet. And if you don't train in that environment, you're going to be shocked when you get there. And when I was in Colorado, they would do this barbells and bruise weightlifting meet. And it was the only one I debated actually trying because it was at a brewery and the crowd was loud. That was it was a different rules. It was still a sanctioned event, but for whatever reason, they were able to do this. And so the environment was just totally different. And I'm like, that's what I would need. Like the silence, I would be like, oh God. So these people need to recreate their training environment more frequently than they realize, because it's such a different environment and going on the platforms and things like that. So yeah, I mean, some people are like, it's like test anxiety. Like you see this throughout your whole life. You can pinpoint. And it's the same even when you take it from sport to like life, right? Like I know I shouldn't eat this thing. I know I shouldn't say this thing, but sometimes my lip gets to me, my emotion gets to me, and I say the thing, right? It's the same. It's like, you know what you need to do. Why don't we do it? And so that's the piece that it depends.
Luckily in weightlifting, they're starting to make changes. So like the last few national meets, there's even been music that's been like pretty good and kind of loud, and it's like, okay, like finally.
Oh, wow.
Local meets there in New England
nice.
here. Our new president has done a lot to improve the quality of music and making it a little more entertaining for our guests to watch too. But
that's cool.
There is something you said there. So about expectations. So you said confidence is knowing that you've trained for it and you've, put all the effort into it. But there's not having an expectation that I am going to do it. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Because that's something I also see with a lot of people, whether it be a heavy training session that we've been working up to or a competition day, when there is an expectation that I need to perform, that I need to have these things done. I need all the stars to align with my weight, my nutrition, my all my training reps need to be perfect. If I miss a lift a week out, it's the end of the world. So there's all these expectations where, like, at the end of the day, it doesn't fucking matter. So can you go off on that expectation piece of confidence a little bit more?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. Like the first thing I would do, even if say you're my client and you say that, I would be like, and you say all these things need to go well, I'd be like, why? Tell me why. And it's like they will try to justify it, but they think about it and then they talk themselves into it. Like you got to let them realize on their own. And then they can justify it. They're like, well, scientifically. And then it's like, okay, science only goes so far. Why do you think this works and that works? And like, so then you kind of get them into this, okay, tell me about a time that you didn't follow everything perfectly and the results were pretty good. So you just have to get them seeing that like things don't have to be perfect for the outcome they're looking for. So that's the first piece, is separating those two beliefs, right? It's a belief that if I don't do every single step leading up to this, it will not produce this outcome. That's a made up belief. Then there's getting into them personally and like, why do you believe this? Where does this come from? And then it's also just letting them realize, like, if I were to get into like any other situation that you aren't prepared for, could you handle it? Okay, why? Well, I build off all of these other experiences, and also I don't care about the outcome. I wasn't prepared for this, and so the outcome was just sort of whatever happens. So you're really just getting them to understand, like, the example I use is if you lose a game, can you still be confident? Okay. Why? Yes, I can. Why? And like think about it. Well, I can learn from the mistakes. I can learn from this. So it's teaching them also that every lift is a learning opportunity. So there's a lot of different ways to go. It's really going to depend on the athlete specifically because everybody has expectations. Like you obviously are doing this for a reason, but it's really emotionally identity wise tying them not to the outcome as well. And so a lot of people will be so bent out of shape because it's not about, oh, I missed the lift and what people think about me. That's like a very common first thing that people assume. It's really, who am I if I don't hit this lift? And their identity, they build their life around this. So it's really for them, it's not even about what do people think about me. It's who am I if I can't do this? So it's really separating those things and making them realize they are their values. They are their characteristics. They are the person who shows up every day. They're hardworking. And once you get them tying their identity to that, the outcome
I love that.
has less pressure.
Because I've had that issues too, especially my like younger 20-something-year-olds that like are just coming out of college and they want to start being. I had one kid like he identified as a powerlifter, and then he had this horrible back injury happen outside of lifting, and he couldn't powerlift anymore. He couldn't squat or deadlift, and like he was so lost, and he like didn't know what to do. And I was like, "Who are you?" He's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Who, you know." Who do you identify yourself as? And he's like, well, I was a powerlifter, and like, I don't know anymore. I was like, dude, there's way more to life than powerlifting. Like, no one is going to come to your funeral and, engrave that you deadlifted X amount of weight, right? No one cares. No, like literally there's so much more to life and being a good person and helping others and like trying to change the world in some way that has nothing to do with lifting weights.
And sometimes I think you need that like jolt of reality sometimes. Like it's like we all have like that, like someone dies and you're like, oh my God, suddenly all your problems seem so minimal. And sometimes you need that like jolt for them, like as a meet's coming up, like your problems are so first world. Like, let's be real here. You're not fighting for food. Like, so if you go out and miss your lift, like you're kind of being selfish if you are putting all the pressure on that. And so obviously it's like, doesn't diminish that for all of us, we feel that way sometimes, but I do like thinking about things in that way and reminding ourselves like, this is a choice. There's a professional athlete who says, pressure is a choice. Pressure is a privilege. Like, this isn't pressure. Pressure is the mom who needs to go out and work 3 jobs to feed her kids, right? This isn't pressure. And so there's a lot of different ways to think about it. Hold on. I thought I heard something in my background. I got distracted.
Okay.
No, I'm good. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can cut that out.
And so, just like you said too, every lift is a learning opportunity. And that's one thing I fully believe in. And, as we're coming up on meets and everything, like everyone just looks at the small minutia and the micro pieces of what's going on day to day with training. And like, they start to hyper focus on this stuff when really it's like, we need to take a step back. And it's like, you've been training for 2 years. Like the average weightlifter, like there's been some really good coaches out there that say it takes 7 years to make a good weightlifter. Not great, just good. Like there's so much that goes into it. And from the coach's perspective of mine of like, okay, you want to do this and you want to get to, X level of, you want to compete nationally or internationally, right? These small local meets, like as much as they mean to you, and I'm glad like they're important to you. Like I want you to take them seriously. The thing is, like, it's just one meet in your lifting career. Like there's going to be like 30 or 40 of them. And each one is a learning opportunity for us. So not every meet for me is about winning or you going 6 for 6 and PRing all your lifts. It's, well, how did the taper work? How did we feel going into meet day? What stressors did we have leading up to the meet? Were there life stressors outside of training with, family illness, deaths, work changes, stress, living home environment? And then, what did our training look like? And then each meet to me as a coach is, okay, did we do better with a lot of volume leading up? Did we do better with a lot of intensity? How did the taper work? Like, did we need to give it?
Yeah. You have to learn a lot about. what's
for
going
a
to set them
coach
up
to
for
learn.
success.
Yeah.
And everyone's different. And it's like, I think about sports in general, like, right? A lot of weightlifters, CrossFitters, all these people were competitive athletes. Like, so this is kind of going to tie all the previous conversations together in that one, there is an entire like curriculum on transitioning college athletes to life because they lose their identity, because for 20 some odd years that was their identity. And I went through it when I had a heart condition in college and couldn't play sports for a year. And I remember I said to my sisters, wait, I used to introduce myself as Lauren, the field hockey softball player. Like, now what am I? And I'm like, how, what? Like, that's just how I thought of myself. And so when you think about these people, they come from being athletes, like this is their entire identity. And so then you take that and you go, it's the same thing as like telling a 14-year-old girl that boy that like doesn't like her, being like, this is one little thing in your entire life. But in that moment, no matter who you are, you cannot see it. And so it comes from experience and development. And so it's really being able to have that hindsight in the present moment, like being able to, in this moment, go, oh, this isn't going to matter in 2 years, 3 years. But that doesn't happen overnight. That happens through experience. And so if they're a little bit older, it's easier because they've had life experiences you can at least draw from, even if it's their first weightlifting meet, right? You can be like, okay, remember the first time you had to public speak and you thought it was the end of the world. And then now you've done 10, 15, 20 times, right? So it's like pulling a similar experience and being like, remember when you thought this was this and it wasn't? So that's how you do it when they don't have that experience in that world, because it's really just like how people think in this is how they think when they're stressed. This is a stressful event for them. Those patterns of behavior, they've developed for years. So you can find it in other areas and go, and then you can even ask them what's worked for you in other similar situations. So like, that's another thing I'll do. Like, I have a lot of tools and strategies I can give people to use, and we'll try them on for size. But if I'm getting someone right before a weightlifting meet, I don't have the kind of time to try that stuff on. So I go, tell me about other life scenarios. I go back to different things. Okay, what made you get through that hard time? Okay. And then we create a strategy as fast as we can for that. And then I'm like, cool. Now, once this is over, we're going to actually try all these other things and see what's actually the best for you. Just like you just said, if you got an athlete right before, you'd be like, I don't have time to prep you. So
Yeah.
Go for broke, see what happens. And then we'll
That's
create
not
a plan
exactly
after.
what we do, but something like that.
No.
So yeah, I think that's the big thing there is, there is so much to learn, and it's like in different meets we're going to try different things, and everyone wants to just do the best at this meet, and it's like, well, no, we need to know how to make you the best in the long term, right? So certain meets, depending on how much they matter or not for their athletic career, like this girl Brooke, now I coach, she's 15 years old, she's number 1 in the country in her age and weight class, she's crushing it. We went to nationals, we played it a little more on the conservative side, but still, this was a meet that mattered. So I didn't put a lot of pressure on her, but she was comparing herself to someone else, and she was trying to chase numbers based on the girl that was in the number 1 seed that was above her. And that girl was competing that same weekend, and she was there, and she kind of probably got in her head a little bit. Her nerves, she's been a very laid back lifter, and that day she was just a little off, and she told me after, she like leading up to it, and her mom told me too. But then the next week she did a meet back-to-back weekends, which I did not condone this, but she wanted to do it, and I was like, hey, you're 15, whatever, let's go for it. And so she went from going, I think she went 3 for 6 at nationals and missed a couple big lifts, to the next weekend, like there was none of that. And I was like, hey, we went past nationals, this meet doesn't matter as much, we're just gonna put you in I'm gonna stress you out today on purpose. I want to see what you're made of, right? We're going to open a little bit heavier. We're going to hit bigger numbers, and we're going to kind of overreach a little bit. And I didn't tell her that until day of. Yep, she went 6 for 6, took home all the New England records, won her age class, took 3rd for overall in the open against 30-year-old women that are, genetically much more developed. And then, but it's just like, yeah, that whole thing of like, she wasn't comparing herself to anyone that day. She wasn't afraid of losing that day. She just wanted to win. And I gave her.
This is why, like, the athletes, like the fighters, before they go in, they trash talk, because if you can get in someone's head and without realizing it, and that's what happened. She put all this pressure on it, And competition, especially I think females at that age too, in general, to see another one and be partly intimidated, partly jealous, partly all these things, and then partly like, well, I want to be like her. Like there's
Yeah.
so many components, and it's nice to hear that she was able to turn it around, but she also just in general had less pressure on that situation, even though you tried to recreate it, which
Yeah.
is a great strategy. Um, yeah, it's fascinating and how humans like, and that's why having a coach that you trust matters too, right? Just like somebody can knock you off your game, someone can pull you right back in too and teach you how to go around that. So having a coach you trust that knows the right things to say, and like you've been doing it a while now, so you can think back to coaching other people and being like, I
Yep.
wish I did this then. And you have that experience now. So as a coach, you have that. The world itself is just like growing too. Like weightlifting 10 years ago
Yeah.
wasn't what it is today. So there's a lot
Yeah.
to still be
Yeah. And the thing
learned.
is, like, you always want to try something else. Not that the grass is always greener, but it's like, how do we develop you in the long term for like when meets really start to matter? That, is it low volume that you're better with? Is it higher intensity? We don't know until we try. And so every meet might be a little bit different, and maybe
Yep.
you're not happy with the results, but what we know is we can come in with a better plan in the long term. And those are the things that a lot of people just don't want to see in the moment of, oh, I missed these lifts in training 3 days before. And it's like, it's okay. Like science says, like, you're going to super compensate and you're going to be there on meet day. And
Yeah. Well, and like in general, people just have no idea. Like they think everything that's happening right now matters. Like we are such a, I need the results right now. So to miss right now doesn't like they put so much more weight on that and they want the results right now instead of being like, oh, I just got into weightlifting. It's my second meet. Like things are not going to go great. And if you go in and have a like beginner's luck or you do well on your first meet and then you don't do well, that I almost would rather people screw up the first meet because then they're like, they just
mhm.
expect it. And that talk about expectations, they're like, well, I did well, so I'm going to continue to do well. And then when they don't, they think it's over. And it's
S-
like,
s- so do
no.
you find with expectations, if people come in with no expectations, they do better than having expectations? It doesn't have to just be weightlifting, but like anything. Okay.
It depends on the person. I think overall, the perfect combination is so there's this theory, and it's basically about your arousal. And what you're thinking doesn't necessarily matter. It's what gets you into your right, like bell curve. So it's like a bell curve. And it's called the eyes off theory, individual zone of optimal functioning. And what it is basically there's this bell curve of like the amount of, okay, this is optimal for me, like emotion, arousal to be in. And it's different for each person and for each thing. So I use the example in field hockey, mine needed to be a lot higher on the like emotions, like anger, a little bit like, jittery. With softball being such a like one-to-one sport, it was this way. And so it's really what's your optimal like arousal emotion level and how do we get you there? And for some people, that's the combination of something that matters, but I'm able to say it doesn't matter to me. Like when you interview for a job you don't actually want, you seem to do really well versus when you interview for the job that you really, really want and you screw up and you overthink it and make mistakes. So it's really teaching people this matters, but how do you, I don't give a
hmm
fuck about this. And that, so to your point, yes, but it depends. Some people,
Yeah.
that's not going to work for
Yeah.
them.
I've always found like some of the days where I wake up and I'm like, ugh, I don't feel that good for training today. Or like, I just feel like I didn't get a good night's sleep. And it's just like, throw the baby out with the bathwater before I even get in the car and make my way to the gym. I end up having the best lifts. And even like, not so much now, but when I was like, I don't know, 23, 24, like you go out Friday night, you have too much to drink. You're like, oh shit, my lifts are going to suck. And then it's like, the weight's moving. Let's keep going. Let's see where it goes. And it's like, oh shit, I PR'd. And it's like that from a,
Sometimes I think that's the carb loading of the beers that you probably had because I've had that. I'm like, I'm just full of
yeah,
carbs.
physiologically though, like the liver isn't functioning. Your sleep wasn't great. You're tired, but like, I also, you just don't give a shit.
But you didn't give a
And
shit.
it's like, yeah,
Yep. There's a level of, well, it's the same as why people go out and drink to begin with. Like people like are in a social setting and they're like, oh, just get me a drink so I can take the edge off. You're doing the
yeah.
same thing, just on the other side, right? You're taking the edge off and you're just too tired to think. And so it slows your brain down. And
hmm
yes, I
Yeah.
agree.
And then with that too, a lot of things I've I was working with a business coach actually, like a business mindset coach recently. And one of the things that came up that I never really
Yeah.
have talked much about, or done much digging on was our own inner critic and battling those kind of voices in our head. That's like, why do I put so much?
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Where does your inner critic come from?
Definitely. I don't want to go too deep on this, but
I know what you were thinking, right? You
yeah,
thought of a parent or something, right?
yeah,
But people don't ask that. And once you ask that, it changes the way
yeah,
you think about your inner
yep.
critic.
Mm-hmm.
So, right? And your face, and everybody does the same thing, and you're like, oh, what? And now all of a sudden you can tell it, like, shut up, mom or dad, or shut up,
Yeah,
Joe, or shut up, right? And you start to pull yourself away and go, that's not me, or you call it like the good or bad devil, like whatever. But I am a fan of like naming that thing and being like, or that's like bad bread or good bread or whatever, like naming it and telling it to shut up and like really separating it like a human. But yeah, when you ask that question, people are so obsessed with like, why am I so judgy on ourselves? Well,
yeah,
where did you learn that?
yep.
Right? I blew your mind, didn't
Yeah,
I?
no, I mean it's completely true, and it's like it's something I worked on, and was like, yeah, shit, like I've become a very high achieving person and overachiever in many aspects of life, as some would say, and I'm very grateful for that. But yeah, my
Mm-hmm.
parents put a lot of expectation on me as a kid, which I'm glad they did. It made me a successful individual. However, it just kind of became this learned behavior of I need to do everything better and better and better and better until like it's like what gives? Like when can I give myself a break? When am I okay with what
So
I'm
I,
doing? And it's just it's fine.
yeah,
It's satisfactory, and I can live life this way.
I think there is a huge learning curve because, kind of like I said about everyone has a little bit of something in them. Like we're all on some spectrums here and there, and it gets worse with stress. Like the same is true when it comes to high performers, our high performers and like overachievers and all those all the language you just used because they developed coping mechanisms for stressors of things like pressure and whatever that made them successful. And then they kept feeding it because the success got you validation or got you into the program you wanted or got you here. So then you're like, I have to keep doing it this way because that's what got me there. And it's not until you get to a point of like high level stress, like you having multiple businesses at the same time and managing relationships and managing all this stuff, that you go, oh man, I missed a few things and I'm still okay. And that's really when people start to take the edge off and realize that. And it really only comes when you're at a point of like being an adult and it's just the only way. And that's when people I think start to learn. If you can learn it sooner, that's awesome. So like you as a coach, I would start like I love coaches that set you up for failure. When you set them up for failure so that they start getting used to it, like you give them a task that can't be done. You have the team solve a problem that is unsolvable and you see what happens. You see what happens when shit hits the fan. The more you put them in that situation, the more used to it they're going to be. And the more likely they are to be like, this is just a prank. This is just a joke. Or they like turn it into that. So when they fail a lift, they can't hit that lift that you think you're supposed to hit. And then joke's on you. We never thought you could hit that yet. We just wanted to see how you handled
Watch
the
out, team.
pressure. Like that stuff. Yeah. They're like, great. But then it becomes this whole thing of like, is he playing me or not? And then on the other end, you throw them a lift that you
Yeah,
thought they couldn't hit and they hit it. And it's like, that was supposed to be a
yeah.
prank. And look what you
I
did. Right? Like now they just are like, oh shit, I don't know what's coming at me, but I just have to put my head down and do the
that
work.
already happened this morning with someone, one of my athletes. So yeah, yeah,
I
like
love it.
tripling
I love it.
85% is no easy task. Like typically you don't go past 80. So it's like, yeah.
That's
And
impressive.
so she was like, hey, what am I supposed to do on this workout? I wasn't very clear on, I guess. And I was like, oh, here's an example. Like you're going to work to this and this and this. And like, you could do a triple at 85%. And she's like, well, can I go higher than that? I've tripled 85%. And I was like, yeah, it was just an example. Like, go ahead. Not that I expect. So, but
Feel
then this
good?
person might get to 93 to 5% and can't do a single. When it's like, if you can triple 85, we know you can do, like, you can do this. But it's like, And it's like,
Scientifically you can do it. Then it becomes, why did the form go away?
yes.
What did you lose because you were in your
Yeah.
head, or yep. And that's where that's, and people don't realize how much they need to work at those weights, like from a mental standpoint, right? So like scientifically, you guys have the thing about mindset and why psychology is tough and hard to measure. It's hard to measure. I can't go take a blood test and prove that this is the outcome. I can't, there is no like scientific evidence that if I do XYZ exercises for this amount of time, this number, math will turn into this number. That doesn't exist in psychology. But from experience and theories and research, you can make the assumption that if this person practices above 85% more frequently, even if that's not part of the programming, the more comfortable they get mentally above that number or whatever their sticking point is, like that's what it, even if they're failing it, even if they're missing the lift, but working above it, they're getting comfortable with that weight overhead or that weight on their back, or they just need to be around the weight more mentally.
All right.
That's my thought.
Weightlifting, I don't know. That could be a big debate. You could have a lot of coaches coming at you for that because the goal in training is to really not miss lifts, but maybe in CrossFit, I don't know. I don't know what you guys are doing over there.
Okay. So, well, yeah, and that's true. It's a CrossFit perspective, but it's not about necessarily missing. It's getting them comfortable. Like, so here's one. How about instead of that, you go, okay, you're not going to squat this weight, but you're going to load it and get off the squat rack and then put it back.
Yeah.
Like, do you guys do that ever? Like, because that's just getting them psychologically comfortable. Like, here's an example, and yeah, weightlifting, it depends. But like, I had never jerked I had never had 200 pounds over my head, and it was like on the cusp of like jerking 200 pounds. And so my coach put 205 pounds, whatever, I talk in pounds, not kilos, in a rack hard enough so that I could just lift it up and pull back and be in my jerk position overhead. He's like, because I was afraid of holding it over my head. Right. And so, and it was like that weight of being over my head scared the shit out of me. But it was like, I could get it up, but I didn't believe that I could hold it up. So I needed to prove that I could hold it up before I could get it
up. We'll do those things with people too, of like overloading, like, okay, you can snatch balance this 3 times at your max and you can pull it at 110%. And you can do all these variations in between. It's like, you can clearly do this lift. And it's like, oh. I'm like, do you think you can do it? It's like, oh, yeah, I think I can. It's like, okay, well, let's go fucking do it.
You know, and you had asked something about visualization. I'm curious if this brings you into visualization at all. Like,
so
do you guys do any of that?
That's what I wanted to talk to you about, of like, what is a good visualization practice for someone? Because yes, I do encourage my athletes to visualize themselves lifting different weights and, you know, in different circumstances and things. But, and there's a lot of good research on visualization. So my thing is like, when do we do this? Do we do this first thing in the morning, at night, like right before a lift? How long? Is there like a certain period of time they should be practicing these things? Or is it just kind of here and there and everywhere where they think about it?
I think it's better to get used. It's like anything. The more you practice it, the better you get at it. And so I think it's better to start having practice with it before you go to bed is usually my favorite one, because that's when you're thinking about it anyways. But you're also kind of like calmed down. You're usually in a state where you're trying to get more calm. And so you can practice it with a little more control. And then after that, the better you get at it. It's just like breathing, right? Like everybody breathes wrong, diaphragmatic breathing. They have to practice it more, but they probably practice it first laying on the ground. And then it becomes, okay, now do it while you're lifting. Now do it. And then they should be able to do it right before they lift to calm themselves down when their arousal is too high. So it's the same with the visualization. The more you practice it in controlled environments, when you're in an uncontrolled environment, you're going to have better control of it. So I recommend, like, if you're doing this for sport, practicing it at night, whatever. And then over time, you can do it right before the lift. You visualize yourself doing it. There's also 2 ways people visualize. So some people see themselves like they're watching a video of themselves, and some people prefer to see themselves as themselves. So they see what they would see doing the lift. I do both. Like, I recommend both. I recommend you try both and see. And a lot of people can do both, but some people struggle to control one versus the other, which is interesting. So I always recommend like trying out different things, figuring out which one you like better, which one seems to be working for you through practicing it before those heavy lifts, and the more comfortable you get with it. And then there's all the research out there. You've probably read this about, your brain can't tell the neural pathways. It will actually think that you did it before. So I'm a big proponent of like practicing that lift before you do it visually.
Can you just repeat those two things again for people? So what were the two different ways to look at it?
So you can view yourself as if you're watching a video of yourself. Person. So you can like in your head be imagining yourself. Yep, third person, and then first person. So you can view like what you would view if you were actually doing the lifts and I keep going to snatch. I don't know why that's what I'm showing you, but so I would view what I would view, and I'd see the barbell how I see the barbell, and I would imagine it that way. But a bigger piece to visualization, it's really about all the senses. So you don't want to just use imagery. You want to hear the sounds you'll be hearing, whether it's a silent weightlifting meet or a loud one, like even preparing and knowing which one it is and preparing that in your head and imagining the background noise, feeling the chalk. You want to incorporate smells, like the taste of sweat. Maybe you drink whatever your amino acid drink you're drinking or whatever it is that you have in between. You want to incorporate everything so that it's as real as possible. And also that's what makes your brain believe it actually happened.
Wow. There's a lot to that I never really thought of. And when we say visualization too, like one thing I kind of typically do is I think back to a time I hit like a really heavy lift. Like I can think of like two specific meets where like the weights felt heavy. It was a big reach number for me, but I'm like, what was I thinking at that time? What was in my head? So are those kinds of things still part of it? Would you consider those part of visualization?
Yeah. And what I would do is take you back to that and say, like, put yourself back there and try to go through it and remember it and recall everything that you can. And then you can keep doing that. But yeah, that's a visualization. It's also, so I talked about the different sources of confidence. At the end of the day, a lot of stuff we had talked about before, it is confidence. It's just talking about it in different ways and how it's playing out. And that's what a lot of this is. There's different sources of confidence and way to build confidence. And that is why, and one of those is past experiences, both good and bad. So when people are struggling with confidence, it's taking them back to a past experience like that. When's the last time you had a successful weightlifting meet where you put a lot of weight on the bar, you lifted a weight you didn't expect, whatever, you pull on that similarity. And the same goes for when you can learn from failure. So you can build confidence off of like when you try a new drill, the first time you do it, you're like, this is weird. And then the next time you felt what you did wrong. And so you build confidence the next time you go to do it. So it's the same in that regard too, is like imagining it, building confidence by going back to past experiences. Like this collection of things, it's what sets someone up mentally for a great lift or to be a great mental lifter. Like they can carry that kind of personality trait of, man, they always perform under pressure.
What about actually watching like prior videos of themselves doing lifts like before a big meet?
I would say probably only watch good ones, but it depends on the person. I mean, for me, I would say most people probably shouldn't watch a failed lift, would be my suggestion. I mean, unless you are critiquing it a few days before, but the day of, I wouldn't even put that thought in someone's brain. Like, I would only watch
that's what I've always
lifts.
done is something I always do leading up to heavy meets or heavy days or whatever. It's like I'll look back to some lifts and comparatively now they're not the numbers. I have better numbers now than I used to, but even looking back at those other ones, it's like, oh, you know what? That was a time like it was a good day. I felt good. Like that was a big weight for me then. And you look at it like I made it look so easy. And it's like, oh, I'm like that truly gets you to believe like, oh man, like I am strong and capable of this. And like, it's been 3 years. Yeah. I can handle 5 more kilos than this now. And like, I can do it and make it look just like that.
Yeah. That's it. And that's a good idea. And the other one too, some people prefer just like, this is why motivational videos and stuff work too. If there's a weightlifter you admire or some other thing that you admire, like in college, we listened to the Al Pacino Any Given Sunday speech before every field hockey game. If I really need to be like in the zone, I'll just play that for myself. And it's like, it might not be related to what I'm doing, but that thing gets me excited. And so it's really sort of like back to the eyes off of what's going to get you in the zone. So if that's for you watching old videos, but this is where experimentation comes into play and practicing it before big lifts at practice, right? Because you have to know what works for you and what got you excited. Maybe it was a song, a pump up song. Maybe it was some people, it might be watching the failed lift. Maybe they're really driven by failure and like getting pissed off, and that's where they need to be. Like me being pissed off before a softball game was not going to be good. Being pissed off before field hockey, watch out. So that's where even with lifts, I have lifters that snatch versus clean and jerk, more Olympic lifting. They need to be in a different state of arousal because the snatch is so much more technical. And so they need to be more calm. Whereas the clean and jerk, while technical, you can muscle through it a little bit better than a snatch. One wrong move on a snatch, it's over. So even that, they have to be in different levels of
Yeah,
their
absolutely.
mental state.
I always know that for me, both of those lifts are a very different kind of approach to the bar. One has more poise than the other. And if you want a new good motivational video for weightlifting specifically, I highly recommend The Lion Killer by Donnie Schenkel. Yeah,
All right, I'll write it down.
That's my pump up jam for before a big lift day.
As a CrossFitter, a lot of people watch the old like CrossFit Games documentaries and stuff, and those will still get me excited. I'm like, wow. You're like, no, I have so many thoughts about CrossFit.
And so, where does this bring us? So, yes. So the whole visualization.
What's like, you really go ahead. I want to know what would help you the most as a coach thinking about sports psychology?
I mean, that's such a good question. We could have a whole nother episode about this, but I mean, a lot of the things we just talked about are a lot of them. And just, the thing I've noticed over time is, yes, everyone is different. Every single person that I coach, it's not just about sets and reps. It's about who are they as a person? What do they respond to? And it's like, for me, I think not that it's the hardest thing for me as a person, but as any coach is probably getting to know this person and knowing what they respond to. And I think the hardest part of coaching is going out and trying new things and not being afraid to fail as a coach, in a sense that I'm going to try this behavioral strategy with someone and I might fall on my face and this person might not like me for it, but I need to know. And that's something I'm kind of doing now of like, again, we kind of talked about it a little bit of, I was giving a couple of these lifters like all this extra feedback, and, we went to this big meet and it wasn't a lifetime performance. They didn't PR, they didn't do anything, and some other circumstances happened too. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, I gave you all this feedback and we kind of went paralysis by analysis potentially. Now, I'm not going to be that guy. Now I might be the angry, mean football coach that's like, shut up, do more. Like, you might not like this right now, but this might be what you need. And so I've already started playing some mental mind games with some people of like, oh, you want to lift heavy weights? Well, in our mind, in my mind as a coach, like what this person needs right now is to just hit lifts. And the more they miss, the more their confidence starts to go down. So it's like every time you miss, or it's just like, people will also be like, well, it doesn't matter, it's just training. It's like, no, this does matter. So what we're going to do now is anytime you try to go take a heavy single and you miss, you have to back down 5 kilos and do 2 sets of doubles before you go back and do another single. And it's like, what? It's like, yeah, we're going to make shit matter now, because I know you guys don't want to go back and do 2 sets of doubles and then go back and do a single, but that's the way it's going to be. And no one's going to like me. No one's going to like me.
That's a good strategy.
But
it's a good strategy.
But the thing we don't know is, will this person actually respond to this? And at the end of the day, are they going to be able to see that light at the end of the tunnel that he was right? Some people might not. Some people might leave. And it's something you got to be okay with.
But that's what I was going to say. It's like, you have to be, and that's why I share, like, you are your brand, right? And I share all the time. I'm like, I am not for everyone. I'm not going to, because I am the person that acts as a therapist and I will validate the shit out of you, but then I'm also going to call you on your bullshit. And that's not for everyone, and that's okay. And so for you, one, I think you would know, especially after this time, who can handle it and who can't. And so you're probably making your best guess, but as a coach, everybody's always trying to improve. And it's like, good coaches can teach the sport. Great coaches can get them to be their most optimal performance. And like, then the next level is like, can I get them to get themselves there? And that's what you're doing, is you're going to that next level of, I can get you there with my words. You like, I can teach you what to do, but can we get you to get there on your own through the mind games I'm going to play with you? And you're learning different strategies with that and how to approach that. And even if it doesn't work that day, sometimes it's, did it work a few days later? Was it they slept on it and they're like, man, Coach Brett, I'm gonna like, and then it's 3 days later and they're like, ha, take that. And then they come and they also tell you they're excited about it. And then they have to be like, but I was picturing how much I hated you while I did it. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's what worked for you.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll throw money down now on lifts. It's like, yeah, no, you're done. It's like, no, I really want to hit this. It's like, fine, $10. I bet you $10 you can't fucking hit it.
It's so funny because I love to think back to like, and I have different stuff I'll use with my athletes, but doing it through like this versus being how I approach an athlete that I'm like on the field with, right? Versus just talking through stuff with, because I'm giving them strategies. But I think back to how like sports psychology is innate in some people. And when I was learning to bunt in softball at 10 years old, what they did was that the dad went and put dollars and like $5 where you were supposed to hit it. And the goal was like, you want it? Bunt it in the right spot. You get to keep it if it lands on the money. And I'm like, yes, like 8-year-old Lauren's like, I'm getting $5 and bunting it in the right spot. So like, people need accountability no matter how old you get, or like some sort of motivation or something to avoid. That's why I'm doing like push-ups every time or for me, it's like if we're trying to hit a heavy lift in CrossFit, it'll be like, you have to do 10 burpees for every one you lift. So don't go trying to have fun and just hit that. I'm like, I hate burpees more than I like lifting heavy. Yeah. So like, I'm not going to go too heavy.
Yeah. So it's really just learning, what people respond to. Is there something we're missing with them? Does this person like, are they okay with confrontation? Do they not like confrontation? Are there things they're holding back from me that they want to tell me, but they don't feel comfortable with, or they're not sure how I'm going to react? There's so much to the coach athlete relationship that we have to manage. And it's something that you'll never have objective data on to say this worked or this didn't, right? It's just a part of the piece. It's like, how do we get all of this to accumulate over time to get this person there? And it's like, okay, I can take these best practices I have and put them in place for this person. And then, I need to be a cheerleader for this person over here and just rah. And I know that I can't cue this person in the middle of their session. I need to wait till after. This other person, I need to slap their back, tell them they're a piece of shit and that they're a loser, and they'll respond to that. And it's just, and then, someone in between, it's just like, hey, just do this, that one little tweak, or knowing it meets, like, some people it's like, oh, I could win if I hit this weight. It's like, yeah, go fucking do it. It's like, all right. Where other people like, don't tell me where I'm at. I don't want to know. I just need to focus on myself right. And it's like, okay, so you need to know these different things about people, and that it takes time. And then as they grow and evolve as a lifter, those things start to change too. And it's like keeping up with the Joneses of, okay, like this person isn't the same lifter they were 3-4 years ago now, which can be great. But it's also just like, there's no sharp answer to, did I do the best job I could do? Because me and my inner critic always wants to be the best, and you just never have an answer for it. So,
yeah, I am a big fan of feedback surveys, like for myself, even as like my, coaching, relationships, my therapy, things like that. Like I'm always just kind of like, to see as we evolve and grow, like, what do you need now? What's worked well? What's not worked well? Because, and especially an anonymous feedback survey through all your athletes, like occasionally, even though it's different for each one, you're going to see themes emerge. And a lot of them will mostly give you the good stuff because they're still with you because they like you, right? And it's working. But one of my favorite things to do, and this is something you can implement as a coach, is when people first start working with you, asking them what they think they need. And here's why. A lot of times they actually do know, but they've never thought about it. Then they tell you, and you start to experiment and see if they're right. And then you kind of keep asking that as you go. And what you're doing is you're actually teaching them what they need, because then they've seen you do stuff, and then through time. So then in the moment when you're not there, you can't be there, or they're lifting on their own and you can't respond right away and give them the validation they're looking for. They're like, what would he say to do? Or what would he ask? He'd say, I want this. I want this right now. Okay, let me get validation from myself. So you also want to teach them how to like self-solve. So that's kind of one of the things I'll do is like at the beginning, see how self-aware they are, then teach them self-awareness if they don't have it. Like maybe they're wrong and they think they need to be mad and they're wrong, and you'll figure that out anyways. But if you start with a set of data that says, well, they told me this, now I'm still going to coach them the same way and see what happens and see if they're right or wrong. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of experiment with it, but you're right. It's really hard to get a true objective measure of am I doing well or not. And that's where you have to use your like, how many clients leave me? How many clients stay? What do they say? What are they improving? What are their results? And just do the best you can.
That is a interesting point too, because that's something that comes up a lot is, and again, the career of a lifter with us changes over time. So a lot of people come in, they want to be more technical, right? Whether it be a CrossFitter or someone with weightlifting. Like one of the big things with weightlifting, especially, is they want to improve their technique, and everyone thinks it's all about technique. And it is a major part of success in the sport of you need to be pretty technical to lift certain weights and get them into these optimal positions and everything else. But then, I never really tell people this. I just kind of want to skirt around it and see how they react to it. But it's like, oh, hey, I'm why aren't I getting as much feedback as I used to? And it's like, well, you don't need that anymore. You know what to do now. You've been with me for 3 years, and like, what's a good lift, what's a bad lift, or what things I expect and within what bandwidth. And so, some people but they go to this expectation of, well, in the beginning, I always got this feedback that was like, this is right, or this is better. And we want to try to do this or that, where like, I think some people just need to get to the realization that like part of this is just practice and mental training and not all about technique all the time. And that's the thing with weightlifters. It's like, can be a really big thing of, they always think it's all about being more technical. And it's like, no, you need to be technical, and you can do it at 60%. You can do it at 70%. I've seen you do it really well at 80%. So, technique, you need the mental fortitude and strength to keep pursuing these things at higher and higher intensities. I can't always do that for you. You need to learn how to do that. And you, through your training, can see what's right and wrong. Okay.
I have a question and a comment. So my question is, are you talking feedback like maybe through a remote coaching type of thing, or in the moment
Both.
watching them feedback?
With our remote athletes,
Both.
Typically, we have a lot of hybrid lifters actually. So a lot will come in on like a Saturday. We have kind of a team training day. But through the week, they're doing their training. So anywhere between like 60 and 90% of training percentages and higher volumes will be those days. But then, on those other days too, like sometimes it's like, and some people don't mind, and they know like, I don't need feedback today. Others like really want it. And it's like, this is the last thing you need.
Yeah.
Or, it's 90%. I'm not giving you 3 cues because that's too much. At 90+%, you should be thinking about one thing.
Yeah.
1 cue.
1 cue. Yes. At least you know that. Well, so it's interesting because the evolution of any relationship in general, whether it's business coaching, fitness, nutrition, like as time goes on, they're always going to need less feedback. That's why my continuity program is like, we meet weekly, then we go bi-weekly, then we go monthly. Like there's a reason, because you just need less support when you're in that. But if they're craving that, it's like, reminding them, good, keep at it, which you probably do that, but that's where they get to the point of when you are an expert or you're mastering something, which these people are at that point of like, they're starting to master it. That's where things get boring and people fall off. And that's the problem, is they have to be willing to do the boring, repetitive stuff that gets no feedback, because your squat is your squat. We got rid of your butt wink. We got rid of this. Like, you have the technique. Sure, there's little things. Do more ankle mobility. Like, do more of that stuff. But you know this already. It's in your, like, there's nothing left for me to give you other than, this sucks.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest parts about it in that transition process with people, is like getting them to realize like, yeah, you're good. And it's like, well, you used to tell me more. And it's like, yeah, but like, I don't need to anymore. It's just, you're doing all the right things.
Yep. And it's almost a reminder. It's going to be boring. Yeah. It's going to be boring when you're good. Right? Like, getting to the top is not glorious and fun. There's parts that are just the same repetitive stuff. And so that's where I say, like, with certain people, it might be finding ways to make it more fun, or finding little ways to like just for sometimes, like at some point it's just going to be what it is. but the feedback can be like, okay, what were you thinking about? How are you
Yeah.
mentally preparing for that lift? Like, that's where you start to get in and go, why don't you practice these skills? Why don't you throw yourself off before that lift and then see what happens? Why don't you have someone tell you something awful? Why don't you go look up like
Ugh.
your ex on social media before that lift and tell me how it goes? Like, yeah, exactly. Like, do shit to put yourself in a stressful situation in those. And I know with weightlifting, it's like, well, we don't
You
want
got
to
to
miss a lift,
experiment.
but maybe there's some blend of doing that. You got to experiment because something's going to happen the day of your whatever my lift or something happened, and you just never know, and you want to prepare. And there's a kind of like, and that wrap up with this, like the Michael Phelps example of swimming when he won the year he won like a million, I mean every year, but like the first year he really made a name for himself. I think he won a bunch of different golds, and in one of the races his goggles filled up with water and he couldn't see the whole race. And when they asked, and he said that after, nobody knew until after. And he said, well, I had practiced everything that could go wrong in my head. I had visualized everything that could go wrong. And so when it happened,
Yeah.
it didn't surprise me. Like, that is the epitome of I've done everything I can mentally to prepare for this. And so that's why I say things like put yourself in those situations so that when it comes,
Yeah, for sure.
You're ready to handle
And
it.
that's one of the interesting things too about coaching in this capacity is like, yeah, if you're a high school football coach, like your kid signed up for football, like you're on the team, like you have these people, holding you there and this and that. There's like no money involved. And it's like, this is what we have to do as a team to do this. Where like when you're coaching these individual sports, it's harder because it's like, I'm paying you to make me do things I'm uncomfortable with. At what point does being uncomfortable, the reward of being uncomfortable, is that underweighed by just doing uncomfortable things because like my coach thinks it's good for me? And it's really,
Yeah, it's like the risk benefit analysis or like the ROI of this. And I truly believe like anyone in their adult life, this is why I think it's not just about what you look like, right? With fitness, like for a lot of people, it's maybe how it starts, but then the people that are really trying to grow and be good in every area of their life, like that's why I've kind of pivoted and I do more like I'm just helping people pursue their most optimal performance in whatever their performance is, whether that's business, whether that's sport, whether that's being a parent, being a leader. Like you have so many different roles. And all these things are the same. And one thing that's common is the only way to grow is to get uncomfortable. And so the people that are doing the hard things, they're going to the gym when they don't want to, whether it's competing or not, they're just like choosing to go be a recreational athlete. They're doing tries on the weekends. They're, choosing to eat healthier and choosing not to drink during the week versus the people that are just like, don't work out. To me, it's those people are getting themselves every day in a position of uncomfortability. And the more you do that, it's like a muscle that you have to train. And so the more you do it, the stronger it gets. And just like anything else, so they're putting themselves in those situations more frequently. And so, yeah, I'm paying you. And trust me, I've paid macro coaches out. And sometimes I'm like, I'm paying you. Why are you telling me this? Like, what the heck?
yeah.
It's like, that's why you're paying them. That's why. To make you do the thing that you wouldn't
sure.
otherwise do.
Yeah. The ice baths are another one like that. That's something I've started doing. And
I can't get myself. I know how good it is for you.
It's not even.
What are your reflections on it?
I mean, there are health benefits to it, right? You feel more energy, like, and I have an arthritic autoimmune condition myself, so for me, it's like really helped with like inflammation and joint pain and tendonitis that I kind of accrue all the time. But for me, more than anything, it's so uncomfortable in there. You have to learn to be very comfortable. And so like today it was 45 degrees up here. The water was 38. I'm outside in my bathing suit at 6:00 this morning. And it's like, I got to fucking do it. But once you do it and you get out, you feel so alive after. But B, you just feel like you could do anything with your day now. Like if I could get up at 6 a.m., half asleep, throw a bathing suit on, go outside. It's raining out today too up here. And jump in a 38-degree tub and sit there for 3 minutes, breathe, and teach myself how to relax. Like the mental side of that for me has been the biggest game changer. Not the energy, not anything else. Like there's definitely like mood increases and things too, but just the fact that it's like when you can get out of that and be like, yeah, okay, like I'm ready for my day now. I am going to tackle anything. It's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah. You're putting yourself, the first thing every day that you're doing is making yourself uncomfortable. So everything
Yeah,
else after
exactly.
that is going to seem like a breeze. Yeah. It's something I've been like on the fence. I'm like, I need to start trying. And then my water heater for whatever reason wasn't working and I was like cold and I'm like, you should do this because you want to practice. And I'm like, I want a warm shower. I want a warm shower. So maybe
The
you've
cold
sparked my
showers are
cold
much
shower starting.
easier than the cold bath, but
I actually disagree. And here's why. I think the cold bath, like once you're in it, you're in it. I think the shower is like intermittently hitting you in different spots. So you're
yeah,
never fully comfortable. But this is coming from someone who doesn't do it very often. And I'm also thinking back to like college when I could like jump in the ice bath after practice, which was way better. And you're just more resilient as a
are you
18 to
staying in it
22
though,
year
or
old
were
than
you just like jumping in and jumping out?
No, I would stay. We would stay in it. They had an ice bath, and we'd dump it all in, and would all just like kind of take our turn after practice. Not always, but if you had stuff going on, and with me, I had chronic hip stuff that's still here to this day, so it was always good to just jump. I mean, we didn't
Yeah,
know anything that we were doing back then. Now I look back, and you'd go in, and but we would stay in it. It was I forget how long. There was timers we would set. I want
yeah,
to say it was probably the three
yeah.
minutes or
No,
whatever, but
it's good.
yeah, we're
I
staying
love
in
it.
it.
So, yeah, more for that mental like fortitude and just yeah. I
Yeah,
think the last thing I have to talk about too um is kind of just this sense of grit. Where like I've just been in this place recently with like um seeing different athletes and different things, and even in my own training, it's just like um I've had some life changes and everything. It's like just this point of like just nothing else matters. Just go in, get it done, and I'm getting it done. And so now it's like just I'm not working out any harder than I was before, but it's just like, or maybe I am, and I'm just like shutting myself up more. When before I could really like analyze everything, and like I had a coach before that was like he was mean to me sometimes, but it worked. Yeah, and it was one of those things like like I have to deal with him again today. Like he's just gonna come in and tell me, I suck and I'm a bitch and this and that. And like I didn't know it at the time, but I needed it. And now I'm like back to that point of like I'm there on my own now. Like self-realization of like, yeah, you're just like you're good at this. Like stop, shut up, get it done. Like it's not about the biomechanics of XYZ. But like now I've just lost like 35
yep.
pounds and like I'm running twice a week, which I've never done before. And like I'm liking running now, which like I've never thought
Wow,
I'd see the day. And I'm like, I'm thinking about signing up for like a half marathon
wow.
at some point, but I got a weightlifting meet coming up first. So
I was like, your weightlifters
I'm
are going to
gonna
be like, who are you?
I'm gonna try to do
What do
both.
you mean you're running a half
But I think it's just
marathon?
that grit of like I want to now see like what my body's capable of, and just like there's all kinds of signs like, oh, don't do this, don't do that, and it's like no, you can do both. Like we can be strong and capable in both areas of life.
Yeah, it's funny because I think part of why I think I latched onto CrossFit, and I actually hated CrossFit before I started it for like a year. I was like, this is stupid, it's bad for you, whatever. But the scientific research, strength conditioning books all said you can only be XYZ, you can only train one muscle group at a time, one energy system. And CrossFit sort of broke that and was like, that's not true. Like you can do both. Now at some point it becomes if you're doing it full time and you have to be doing all that to get both outputs, right? You can do both pretty mediocre, but you kind of also talked about consistency
Yes.
beats intensity always, always. And so I would rather someone go into the gym every day and not hit their like not go all the way up in their numbers and take a little off, but get in there every day than the person who's like, well, I go in, but I miss a lift every week for months on end. But every time I go in, I go super intense. It's like, I'd rather you get the extra day and drop a little bit of weight, and that's obviously not a weightlifting coach. That's not what I train, but just when you think about overall behaviors and,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's kind of what you're talking
So,
about there.
but
I don't know. Was there a
just
question? Well,
grit.
there was a
Like there's
question I
there's a
feel like I
book
wanted
written
to,
about it now, and it's something I've been seeing. Yeah,
yeah,
some more
great.
stuff
Angela
popping out
Duckworth.
about it, and uh, just how like yeah, athletes need to have some type of grit to be successful with things, and like learn to stop looking at all these little minute factors and just like you got to put in the work.
And I do think, well, let me ask you a question and then I'll kind of go off that. Do you notice a difference coaching females versus males when it comes to that, or just in general coaching females
As
versus
far as
males?
having grit,
More just in general, and then
Um,
I'll tie it to grit.
there
But
are some differences in coaching males versus females. Yes.
like, because you talked about your coach needing
Yeah.
to like be mean to you, whatever, and this
I
is an overgeneralization. Like
I'm
some women are one
typically
way or
more of a
another. But
cheerleader for the
go ahead.
women, and there's more positive self-talk and things with where the men sometimes it's like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Like, get your act in gear, get your shit
Yeah.
together, and stop fucking around.
Yep. And sometimes you got to try it out and see because we make these assumptions based off of like the way that the world works. And oftentimes they're pretty true to that. But sometimes it's like, oh, am I doing this because he's a man and I assume that, but really he needs a little more of the nurturing or this and that. And so it's like kind of fun. But you as a coach are figuring out what
The,
athlete needs what. So you're already doing that. But
I
when
was
I
gonna
think
say the
about
worst is
grit,
when
oh, go
like
ahead.
we come to a meet and then my females are like, hit me in the back, and I'm like, this is is that good? It's like, no. It's like, okay.
It's true. It's like you never, sometimes people don't know what to
Yeah.
expect or, you know, whatever. But when you think about grit, it's, again, it's just like a muscle. And like the research says that too. Like she's done a ton on that. But like, that's why I say things about, um, so example, everyone kind of knows like kids that go through stuff are more resilient later. And like grit and resilience are very synonymous, right? And so when you think about like the 15-year-old girl that you have, like if she's never, and she seems to be mentally strong, but you think about these athletes that you face that like and I've had them in sports, like the kids that have never been through anything in their life. And so that's why this sport, and so this 25-year-old, maybe like they haven't had any serious big things happen, and so this is the biggest thing to them. And that's why I'm such a proponent of like making people struggle before that, like make them struggle, make them get comfortable failing a lift. And maybe that's not like kosher in the weightlifting world, but to me it's like, well, what if they fail their opening lift and they have to know that they can then go lift heavier? Like they need to know that they can come back from a failed lift. So it shouldn't be part of their everyday routine. But if they fail a lift, it shouldn't be like, like they should be like, yeah, I failed a lift. Now I'm going to go do it again and I'm going to hit it. Like they need to be comfortable with coming back from it. And so when you think about grit, and like grit is doing the things you don't want to do. Grit is showing up when it's you're not getting feedback because you don't have feedback because you're just supposed to keep doing it, right? Grit is so many things, but it really comes from experience of doing it and seeing that struggle is worth the outcome, even if you don't get the win or the like on paper outcome. It's worth the outcome of what I've gained, what I've learned, how I was able to develop, me showing that I can make sacrifices. Like when you get to real maturity, you realize that yes, you want this thing, you want that gold medal, you want the to hit your numbers, but if you don't, the
Yeah.
last 6 months weren't a waste. And that's the difference. People will go like, "Oh, what a waste." And it's like,
Yeah. No. Yeah.
"What? What do you mean?" Like look at all the stuff you gained. And like you could probably still hit that. Like you still did get strength. You got discipline. You got to. So I mean, grit is great. I think it's a lot about teaching and getting people in those situations early. And if they haven't been through stuff, like right, the kid that's like been through a bunch of trauma, when they drop a barbell, they're like, it
Yeah.
can't hurt me, right? Versus the person who hasn't. And that's why it is really helpful to get to know each athlete individually and what they've been through. And it doesn't mean that if they've had a great life that they shouldn't be able to like it's not like you have to put people through trauma to build that muscle, but it's well, if you're gonna have like everything else kind of put together, let's find ways to make you struggle in other ways so you learn that
Mhm.
struggling does not mean it's over.
Is that Roxy acting? Yes.
Little background from Peanut Gallery.
That's fine. Well, I think this has been long enough, Lauren. Any closing remarks for
Yeah.
us here today, or for reminders for people?
Ooh, reminders. I would say that a reminder is just because it can't be measured
Okay.
doesn't mean it can't
I
be
like it.
improved.
And Lauren, where can people find you?
I'm on Instagram at Lauren Psychology. That's probably where you'll see most of my stuff. So you can go ahead and reach out there or follow me. I post a lot of tips and it's all relevant. Whatever you see the title, if it says business owner, it says just replace whatever your sport is.
Yeah,
like, it's all the same.
Lauren
tactics.
definitely has been putting out a lot of good content about work life balance, nutrition, everything else. So you've been doing work there on the social media grind. So
Yeah, I kind of pivoted to sell online and kind of realized, and it's all just meant to be like, hey, here's who I am, and it's fun. It's a lot of work, but it's fun to just put. I
Yep.
basically ask myself, how can I add value today?
For sure. So,
And that's what I try to
Lauren,
put out
thanks for
there.
coming on. And yeah, who knows? You might get a lot of clients after this one. So, and we got to have you.
Yeah,
We
who knows?
have to
Hit
have
me
you
up.
come down and become a
Thanks.
weightlifter for a day. For a day.
I
Yep.
was just thinking, I'm like, let me come down on a
We'll be there
Saturday or
tomorrow.
something and get a lift on and see how it feels.
All right. Thanks, Lauren.
Maybe I will. Thanks, Brett.